Hi guys, how old are you? I'd love to see the age range of our viewers. Write your age below.
They say you always remember the birthday that breaks you. It started quietly. No big explosion, no family drama, no fight to point to later and say, that's when things changed. No, it was subtle. Too subtle. The kind of hurt that doesn't scream, it just lingers. A feeling that something's missing, but you can't quite name it until it's already carved itself into you. I turned 36 on a Thursday, just an ordinary day in early March. Still gray and chilly here in Cleveland, where spring's more of a rumor until at least May. I had taken the day off work, mostly out of habit. I wasn't planning anything big. No dinner plans, no parties. I'd stopped trying to celebrate years ago. It always felt more like I was doing it to make other people feel better, showing up for my own cake, pretending the attention didn't make me anxious. This year, I figured I'd sleep in, walk my dog, maybe get a massage if I felt fancy. The day started normal enough. My dog, June, licked my face awake around 7:30, demanding breakfast and her usual walk. As I pulled on my hoodie, I checked my phone, half expecting at least a call from my mom, or a text, something. There it was. One text. From her. Happy birthday, sweetie. Sorry we've been busy. Love you. That was it. No phone call, no plans to get together, not even a suggestion for dinner this weekend. I stared at the screen, rereading the words like they might change if I looked long enough. Sorry we've been busy. Busy with what exactly? My parents were retired. They'd been retired for years. My mom spent most of her days gardening or volunteering at some arts foundation downtown. My dad played golf, watched sports, fixed things around the house that weren't broken. What exactly were they so busy with that they couldn't carve out a lunch, or even a real conversation for their daughter's birthday? I brushed it off at first, told myself I was being overly sensitive. I was used to them being distant. Not cruel, not mean, just absent in that weird, soft way that doesn't leave bruises, just questions. I spent the rest of the day doing exactly what I had planned. Nothing. I walked June again, picked up a single cupcake from that overpriced bakery on Euclid, and watched reruns of old courtroom dramas until my eyes hurt. Rachel, my best friend since college, called and chatted for a while, and that helped. She even offered to come over, but I told her not to. I didn't want to talk about my family, and she knew me well enough not to push. 2 weeks passed. I didn't bring it up, didn't text my mom back, didn't follow up, didn't hint that I was disappointed. I didn't want to beg for attention. I'd done that too many times in my 20s, bending myself into shapes just to be seen, only to end up feeling ridiculous. No more. I had work, I had June, and I had a routine. I figured I'd let it go. Then Rachel sent me a screenshot. It was from Adam's Instagram story. My younger brother, 8 years younger, the surprise baby who somehow became the center of our family's universe the minute he was born. In the photo, Adam stood grinning in front of a sleek, high-rise building downtown. One of those new apartments with rooftop fire pits and concierge service and monthly rents that look more like mortgage payments. He held a set of keys in one hand and a champagne flute in the other. Behind him stood my mom and dad, beaming like they'd just won the lottery. Balloons floated in the background, gold and silver. A banner hung across the wall behind them, barely visible, but just legible enough. "Welcome home, Adam." The caption read, "Can't believe this is mine. Huge thanks to Mom and Dad for helping me lock this down. #dream apartment, #grateful." I didn't react at first. I just stared at it, thumb frozen above the screen. I could feel something building in my chest. Not quite anger, not quite sadness, more like disbelief's colder cousin. I zoomed in, scanning every detail like some kind of forensic analyst. There were at least a dozen people there. Friends, co-workers, maybe some family. They'd thrown a party. 2 weeks after my birthday, they'd thrown a party. With champagne and cake and decorations for Adam. I scrolled further and found more pictures. One of my mom hugging Adam tightly, her eyes misty. Another of my dad giving a little toast. lifting his glass like he was proud enough to burst. In the corner, a catering tray of what looked like gourmet sliders. They'd gone all out. No one had told me. I hadn't gotten an invite, hadn't even heard a whisper, and it wasn't like it was some small, spontaneous get-together. This had been planned, organized, funded. My parents had not only remembered, they had coordinated a whole damn event. They'd helped him buy or rent that place. Judging by the location, it had to be pricey. Adam was only 28 and just started some tech job 6 months ago. There was no way he could afford it on his own. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just sat there, phone in my lap, staring at the wall for what felt like hours. Then I got up, put on a coat, and walked June around the block 3 times in the freezing cold until my face went numb. That night, I didn't sleep much. I thought about all the birthdays I'd shown up for, Adam's, my parents, cousins, neighbors. I thought about the times I'd driven back from college just to have dinner with them, the times I brought wine and pie and cards and stood around smiling while they passed Adam the last piece of cake because he's the baby after all. I wasn't even mad at Adam, not yet. He had always been their favorite. That wasn't his fault. But I started to wonder if he even noticed. Did he think this was normal? Did he think every 30-year-old got gifted a downtown apartment and catered housewarming party? The next morning, I sent my mom a simple text. Didn't realize you guys were so busy. She didn't respond. Not that day, not the next. That's when it clicked. I wasn't invisible. I was just easy to ignore. And they'd been doing it so long, they didn't even feel guilty about it anymore. I didn't know it yet, but something in me broke that day, something small but important. A string that had been holding me to them, stretched too thin for too long. And once it snapped, I didn't rush to tie it back together, because for the first time, I started to wonder what it would feel like to stop trying, to let it all go, to stop chasing their love like it was something I had to earn. I just didn't know how far that choice would take me. Not yet. I didn't reach out again for several days. It wasn't just stubbornness, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. It was more that I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to say. Every time I tried to compose a message or even imagine a phone call, my mind hit a wall. Not a wall of anger, something colder than that. Disappointment mixed with exhaustion, the kind that seeps in after years of giving more than you ever got back. I wasn't looking for a fight. I wasn't even looking for an apology, if I'm being honest. What I wanted deep down was to understand how this had become normal for them, how forgetting my birthday, brushing it off with a text, and then turning around to throw Adam a party that could have passed for an engagement celebration didn't feel strange to them. But I already knew the answer. By the time I called, it had been almost a week since Rachel sent me the photo. My mom answered on the second ring, her voice as light and pleasant as if nothing had happened. That casual tone she uses like armor. "Oh, hey, sweetie," she said. "I was just thinking of calling you later." I didn't bother with small talk. I went straight in. "I saw the pictures from Adam's party. Looks like it was a big night." She hesitated for a beat, just long enough for me to notice, then launched into an overly cheerful explanation about how it had all come together so fast, how they hadn't meant to exclude me, how it was mostly Adam's friends, how I wouldn't have wanted to drive downtown on a work night anyway. I let her talk until she ran out of steam. "Did you forget my birthday?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. "Of course not," she said, but her voice had that clipped edge now. "We sent you a message. You know we've just been busy with everything going on." I asked her to tell me exactly what had been keeping them so busy the week of March 7th that they couldn't pick up the phone or invite me to dinner. She stammered something about their HOA meeting, then her book club, then the stress of helping Adam move. It was a string of excuses that didn't even try to hold up under scrutiny. And when I didn't say anything in response, she sighed, annoyed now, like I was making something out of nothing. "Honestly, Erin, you're too sensitive about these things. We've always tried to support you, but not everything needs to be a big deal." That was the moment it all clicked into place. Not just this one slight, but years of them, woven together like a tapestry. I'd always been the strong one, the independent one, the one who doesn't need much, which really just meant I was the one they didn't feel guilty neglecting. Adam was the baby. He got second chances, third chances, hugs, tears, and parental pride that rolled off them like perfume. I got lectures in silence and polite smiles. I didn't blow up at her. I didn't cry. I just said, "You don't get to decide what hurts me," and then I hung up. That conversation haunted me for days. I kept thinking about all the times I'd watched them bend over backward to make Adam's life easier. The time he failed 2 classes his sophomore year, and they paid for a private tutor without even blinking. The time he wrecked his car, and Dad was at the scene before the cops had even finished writing the report. And when I got laid off during the pandemic and had to move into a crappy little rental in a rougher part of town, they never once offered to help. Not with rent, not with groceries, not with anything. They said I was strong, that I'd figure it out. And I did. I always did. That's the problem with being capable. People start assuming you're bulletproof. Rachel came over that Friday night, bringing wine and takeout, and the sort of righteous fury that only a best friend can truly deliver. "You should say something," she told me, mouth full of lo mein. "You should tell them how messed up this is." "I already did," I said. She called me sensitive. Rachel rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might tip over. Of course she did. That's what people do when they get caught playing favorites and don't want to own it. They tell the other kid they're imagining things. She had a point. My entire childhood had been a masterclass in subtle inequality. Not the kind you can easily explain to other people without sounding petty. More like 1,000 tiny paper cuts. Adam got the bigger bedroom because he had more toys. He got to skip chores because he had more schoolwork. He got taken out for dinner when he passed a test. I got a nod when I brought home straight A's. He got encouraged. I got expected. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep the roots of it went. How I had been trained to accept less, not because I was less loved, but because I was expected to not need as much. And that's worse in a way. That's not forgetting to care. It's deciding that you don't have to. I started going over the apartment situation in my head, trying to do the math. Adam's job wasn't anything extravagant. He worked customer support for a health tech startup. Maybe 60 grand a year max. No way he could afford a place in that building, even with good credit. That apartment wasn't something he saved for. It was something they handed him. The next time my mom called, I didn't answer. Neither did I respond when Dad tried to loop me in on a group text about family dinners. They had chosen their son. I had chosen silence. For weeks, I floated in that weird space between anger and numbness. I wasn't sad, not exactly. I was past sadness. What I felt was sharper, cleaner, like waking up from a long nap and realizing how cold the room is. And then, just as I was starting to settle into my new reality, Rachel dropped another bombshell during one of our weekend catch-ups. "You know he's trying to Airbnb that apartment, right?" "What?" I blinked. "He's renting it out?" "Yeah," she said, nodding. "He told Tommy last weekend. Said he's going to make bank off of tourists and still stay at Mom and Dad's for free. Can you believe that?" At first, I didn't believe her. I thought maybe it was a joke. But she showed me the listing. Same building, same furniture, same damn balloons in one of the pictures. He wasn't just ungrateful, he was profiting, using their gift like a side hustle while still letting them baby him in their basement. And they had no idea. I stared at that listing for a long time, something cold and familiar creeping up my spine. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even jealous anymore. I just knew I had a choice to make. Let it go or make it count. And this time, I wasn't going to be the quiet one. After seeing Adam's Airbnb listing, there was no going back to pretending. The pictures were shameless, practically dripping with that overconfident smugness that comes from a lifetime of never facing consequences. His face was in 2 of the photos, smiling, relaxed, drink in hand, like it was a damn magazine shoot for Bachelor Living. There were luxury sheets, some minimalist kitchenware carefully staged on the island countertop, and a caption that read, Downtown luxury pad, steps from the lake. The only thing missing was the fine print that said, "Sponsored by Mom and Dad, leased to you by an entitled jackass." I didn't tell Rachel that night, but something in me snapped when I saw it. Not loud, not dramatic, just a slow internal collapse that felt weirdly peaceful. I'd spent years trying to earn love from people who only offered it when it was convenient or flattering to give. And I was done. There's something liberating about being pushed that last inch beyond the edge, especially when you've been dancing on it for years without realizing it. I didn't cry, I didn't vent. I just sat on my couch for over an hour, not moving, my dog curled up beside me, while I stared at those photos and let the truth sink in. It wasn't just the apartment. It wasn't just the forgotten birthday. It was every birthday. Every time I made myself small so Adam could shine. Every time I made excuses for them, told myself I was just different, more mature, the one who didn't need help. I thought being low maintenance would make me easier to love, but all it did was make me invisible. And what hurt the most wasn't that I was overlooked. It was realizing how easily they had all convinced themselves that it was okay. The next day, my phone started buzzing again. My mom called twice before lunch. My dad followed up with a voicemail in his classic reserved tone, the kind of voice you only use when you're trying to sound calm, but you're actually furious. He said they hadn't heard from me in a while and hoped everything was okay, which we both knew was code for, "Why are you making things uncomfortable?" They wanted to fix the optics, not the problem. That night, I blocked both their numbers. I didn't send a warning, I didn't give them a speech. I just hit block, deleted the voicemails, and poured myself a glass of wine while the silence settled in around me like a warm blanket. And it was silence, not loneliness. There's a difference. Rachel thought I was being harsh. Not because she disagreed, but because she knew I was the kind of person who usually held on longer than I should. She came over the next night with more takeout, and that look she gets when she's trying to talk me down without actually telling me to back off. "You sure about this?" she asked, poking through the curry she'd brought. I nodded, not even needing to think about it. They've never been sure about me, so yeah. I think it's time I returned the favor. She gave me a look, part impressed, part concerned, but didn't argue. She knew this wasn't just about a bad birthday. It was about a lifetime of being the afterthought in a family where love felt more like a performance than a bond. By the following week, the voicemails had ramped up. My dad left one where he sounded almost panicked, asking if I was sick, if something had happened, if he needed to come by. Then, as if catching himself, he softened and said they just missed me and wanted to talk things through. My mom sent emails instead, long rambling ones that jumped between passive-aggressive guilt trips and poorly masked self-pity. She said things like, "We didn't raise you to hold grudges," and "You know how much we love you, even if things don't always look perfect." Funny thing is, I used to cling to those words. I used to dissect every sentence in their messages like a hopeful kid looking for buried treasure, some proof that I mattered more than it seemed. But now, it just read like a script written for someone they wished I had been, someone who didn't notice the uneven scales or question the invisible rules. I never wrote back. Instead, I turned my focus toward Adam, not in an obsessive, revenge-driven way, but with the same quiet determination I've always brought to problems that needed solving. My job as a paralegal meant I'd picked up more than a few tricks over the years, especially when it came to leases, contracts, and local regulations. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew enough to navigate some gray areas. And Adam, bless his arrogant little heart, hadn't even bothered to list the Airbnb under a separate alias. He used his real name, his real email, his real contact number. It wasn't just illegal, it was lazy. I found the building's HOA website and read through their bylaws. As expected, short-term rentals were explicitly banned unless approved in writing, which, judging by the look of his listing, Adam had not bothered to secure. I checked public property records. The unit was under my parents' name, not his. They had bought it outright and handed it over, no questions asked. That night, I crafted an anonymous email to the HOA president. I attached screenshots of the listing, a brief summary of the violations, and a polite note encouraging them to follow up. I used a dummy Gmail account I created for exactly this purpose. No threats, no signature, just facts. I didn't expect results right away. These things take time, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that for once I was no longer waiting for karma to do the work. I was setting the wheels in motion myself. Within 5 days, Adam took the listing down. Within 7, Rachel forwarded me a message from a mutual friend who'd heard Adam ranting at a bar about how the HOA was fining him and threatening legal action. He was fuming, blaming some jealous loser for ratting him out. He had no idea it was me. My parents hadn't said anything either, which meant they either didn't know yet or were still pretending not to. And I felt good. Not proud exactly, but calm, peaceful, like I'd finally stopped yelling into a void and started building a wall between myself and the noise. They kept calling, of course. Even Adam tried once, sending me a vague text about catching up and starting fresh. I didn't answer. I was done catching what they only threw when it was convenient. And fresh, that ship sailed with the banner they hung in Adam's living room, the night I ate a cupcake alone and they toasted to someone else. I wasn't trying to burn bridges. I was just tired of carrying the matches they kept handing me. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over, because some fires don't start with flames. Some start with silence. And mine had only just begun. Revenge, when it finally showed up, didn't arrive in some dramatic flourish of shouting matches or screaming accusations. It came slowly, like a creeping fog rolling in over still water, quiet, deliberate, and cold in its precision. I had always believed that people like me, the ones who bit their tongues and swallowed the years of being overlooked, couldn't do revenge right. We were too calculated, too methodical, too cautious. But I was beginning to learn that when people like me finally decide to strike, we don't do it in half measures. We don't scream, we don't stomp. We simply move pieces around until the ones who ignored us start to wonder when the room got colder. After the HOA sent Adam the violation notice for his illegal Airbnb scheme, I knew there would be fallout. I waited with a kind of still satisfaction, listening from a distance as the storm began to build. Rachel was my pipeline to the outside world. She had always had her ear to the ground. And in a town like ours, secrets didn't last long unless no one cared enough to talk about them. It took less than a week before she heard through the grapevine that Adam had been hit with a fine close to $5,000. Apparently, the HOA board wasn't just annoyed, they were furious. Not only had he listed the apartment without permission, but he had also used guest parking for renters and allowed a weekend tenant to host what sounded like a loud, drunken birthday party that resulted in a noise complaint. The neighbors weren't just mad, they were mobilized. I suppose I should have felt bad, but the thing is, I didn't. I felt vindicated. For once, there were actual consequences. Not excuses, not he's young, not he made a mistake. Real, tangible fallout that couldn't be brushed under the rug or fixed with a check from Dad. Adam had overplayed his hand, and the game was finally changing. My parents, of course, didn't see it that way. I received my first message from my mom about the incident 2 days after the fine was issued. I hadn't heard from her directly in weeks, and I had fully expected that silence to continue. But the tone of her email was exactly what I should have predicted. Measured, heavy with guilt-laced language, and laced with an undercurrent of barely contained outrage. She never asked if I was involved. She never even acknowledged the possibility. What she did say was that Adam was going through a tough time and that the world can be cruel when you're trying to build something. It was laughable, really. As if listing a gift-wrapped apartment on Airbnb, like it was a side hustle, was some kind of noble entrepreneurial endeavor. I didn't reply. Instead, I did something I never thought I would do. I printed the email, read it over my morning coffee, and then folded it neatly and placed it in a folder labeled "Things That Don't Deserve a Response." There was something oddly satisfying about physically archiving their attempts at damage control. It felt like reclaiming space that had always been taken from me without permission. Adam's world began unraveling faster than I expected. Once the HOA got involved, the apartment's management company conducted their own internal review. Within days, Adam's lease privileges were revoked. Since the unit was technically under my parents' name, they were the ones who received the formal letter stating that any further violations would result in legal action and possible forced sale of the unit. I knew this would hit them where it hurt. Their carefully maintained image, their illusion of being the responsible, successful suburban parents whose son could do no wrong. Suddenly, Adam was no longer their golden boy. He was a liability. According to Rachel, who'd heard it from someone who'd heard it from Adam's girlfriend, who had apparently dumped him during this mess, he had moved back into my parents' house in the suburbs. Just like that, the expensive apartment downtown had transformed from a shiny symbol of status to a weight dragging them all down, and I hadn't lifted a finger since that one anonymous email. I'll admit, I took a small amount of joy in imagining Adam trying to explain himself to the HOA board, to our parents, to his friends who once toasted to his big win. There's a very specific kind of discomfort that comes when someone has never been told no in their life and is suddenly surrounded by it. He must have looked like a deer caught in stadium lights, trying to charm his way out of a fire. Still, I kept my distance. I wasn't about to step back into that orbit now that they were in crisis. I knew exactly what would happen if I did. They would start to treat me like the adult in the room again. They would expect me to mediate, to make peace, to help fix things. That had always been my unofficial role in the family. The fixer, the calm one, the emotional sponge who soaked up the tension without ever wringing herself out. But I wasn't going to do that anymore. I had nothing to offer them. Not sympathy, not advice, and certainly not forgiveness. That was something they were going to have to live without for a while. About a week after Adam moved back in with them, I sent one last message, not a reply, but a fresh email to my parents. It was short, polite, and devastatingly pointed. It read, "Hope you're not too busy now. Take care." That was it. No accusations, no breakdown, just a surgical reminder that I was paying attention. Their response came within the hour. My dad emailed me a long letter that read, more like a deposition than a personal note. It was full of justification, layered with phrases like misunderstanding and family values and getting back on track. My mom's response followed shortly after, dramatic, emotional, and entirely self-centered. She asked how I could be so cold. She said families were supposed to support one another through hard times. She said she missed me, and yet, through all of it, she never once asked why I had distanced myself. She never once reflected, never once admitted that anything might have actually been their fault. That told me everything I needed to know. They still didn't get it. They never had. They were so used to me being the quiet one, the good daughter, the emotionally mature one, that the idea I might actually walk away and mean it was beyond comprehension. They thought this was a phase, a flare-up, a little tantrum I'd throw before coming back to fold laundry and ask about Adam's job. They didn't understand that something had shifted in me, not because of what they did that month, but because of what they had always done: dismiss, diminish, deflect. And I wasn't going to spend another year, another birthday, another ounce of my peace trying to explain why I finally stopped accepting less than I deserved. Sometimes revenge isn't about making someone hurt the way they hurt you. Sometimes it's about removing yourself from their reach entirely, about letting the silence become your final word, about being so gone, so completely and unapologetically absent that they finally feel the weight of what they took for granted. That's what I gave them. Not a fight, not an apology, just a quiet, irreversible goodbye wrapped in the kind of silence that says, you had your chance. And when the dust settled, when their son was sleeping in his childhood bedroom and their daughter was no longer picking up the phone, I hope they sat with it, really sat with it. Because the thing about silent payback is that it doesn't end with a slam of the door or a raised voice. It ends with a stillness so loud, it echoes. And I knew, deep down, they were just beginning to hear it. There comes a moment, Paris, after you've burned a bridge, when you stop looking back for the smoke. You stop wondering if anyone saw the fire, if they stood on the other side, waving their arms, begging you not to walk away. You accept that the silence you left behind isn't just the absence of noise, it's a language of its own, one that speaks for you long after you stop replying. That was where I found myself in the weeks after Adam moved back into my parents' house. In the quiet that followed the unraveling, when every call they placed was met with nothing and every email they sent sank into the void of my unread inbox. I had said what I needed to say, or rather, I had said nothing at all, which in many ways was more powerful than anything I could have put into words. And I wasn't just holding the line out of spite. I was doing it because I had realized, painfully and finally, that nothing I said was going to change them. I had taken control, not of them, not of the narrative they spun every time they spoke of family, but of my own space, my own boundaries, my own damn peace. And they didn't know what to do with that. It's amazing how disorienting it is for people when the one who has always stayed suddenly decides to leave. For nearly 2 months, there was no contact, nothing from me, nothing acknowledged by them, but I knew they were still trying. Rachel forwarded me messages they'd sent her, asking if I was okay, if I'd mentioned them, if she could talk some sense into me. I told her to ignore it. She respected that for the most part, though every now and then she'd gently ask if I thought I might regret walking away. I could tell she wasn't challenging my decision. She was just doing what real friends do, which is making sure you're not sinking so far into your hurt that you forget how to breathe. Then came the wedding, not mine, God no. My cousin Jamie, the family's golden girl on my mom's side, was getting married in a massive ceremony outside of Columbus, and everyone, absolutely everyone, was invited. It was one of those weddings where nothing was left to chance, where the favors were engraved and the place cards calligraphed, and the bride and groom had hired a professional planner just to wrangle the timeline. I wasn't particularly close to Jamie, but I had RSVP'd months ago, back when things with my family were just the usual low-level disappointment and not full-blown estrangement. I had every intention of skipping it, but Rachel, ever the strategist, convinced me that showing up was the final card I needed to play. "You don't have to cause a scene," she said, helping me pick out a dress. "But being there will remind them that you still exist and that you're doing just fine without them." So I went. I drove down that Saturday morning in a slate blue dress that made my eyes look colder than I felt. My hair pinned up, makeup precise, not too much, not too soft. I didn't know what I expected, but I hadn't prepared for how fast it all hit me. The moment I stepped into the reception hall, I saw them, my parents, standing near the open bar, laughing with an aunt I hadn't seen in years. They didn't notice me at first. I could have walked past them, found my seat, and slipped through the night with no incident. But part of me, maybe the part that still hadn't entirely let go, wanted them to see me, really see me. My mom was the first to spot me. Her expression shifted instantly, from delight to discomfort, like someone had pulled a curtain back too quickly. My dad followed her gaze, and when our eyes met, I felt an old ache stir somewhere deep in my chest, the one I used to carry around like a second heartbeat. But I didn't let it show. I held his gaze for exactly 1 second longer than necessary, then turned away. It wasn't enough. Halfway through the evening, while the band played a too loud cover of Sweet Caroline, and guests stumbled over each other trying to dance in heels, my mom cornered me near the restroom hallway. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. She just looked at me like I was something that had once belonged to her, but had been misplaced too long to recover. "Erin," she said, in that voice I'd known since childhood, the one that tried to sound calm, even when her world was falling apart. "We need to talk." I told her we were already talking. She asked me what she had done that was so terrible, and I didn't have the energy to give her a list. I didn't want to rehash every moment, every year I'd spent making peace with being second. Instead, I said the simplest truth I had. "You made it very clear that Adam was the one you wanted to celebrate. I just finally stopped waiting for it to be my turn." Her face collapsed then, not dramatically, not like in the movies, but in this small, sharp way that told me the words had landed exactly where they needed to. She started to say something else, but I stopped her. It's not about the apartment, I said. It's about the fact that you didn't even think twice. I walked away before she could respond. I found Rachel near the dance floor and told her I was heading out. We didn't linger. We didn't say goodbye. The calls came again after that night. Voicemails from my dad, texts from my mom, emails with subject lines like "please read" and "family matters." I didn't reply. I saved every message, every screenshot, not because I needed evidence, but because I needed to remember what silence could provoke. I needed to remember that my absence mattered, even if they were years too late in noticing it. Sometimes I listen to the voicemails late at night, not often, just when the loneliness creeps in around the edges and I start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I had gone too far. But each time I do, I hear the same thing. Not remorse, not understanding, just confusion, as if they still don't quite grasp why I walked away. And that's what hurts most. Not that they forgot my birthday, not that they gave Adam the apartment, not even that they lied about being busy. It's that after everything, after the silence and the fallout from the fallout, they still haven't asked the right question. They're still trying to fix the story instead of understanding why it broke. I don't know if I'll ever go back. I don't know if there's a version of this where we sit around a table again and talk about holidays and neighbors and the weather like nothing ever happened. But I do know this. I stopped waiting for them to show up for me. And in that space where they used to live, I built something stronger than their love ever was. I built a life that didn't need them. And I've never felt more free.